I was what the world called free, famous, desired, a millionaire. My face on websites, my videos in the rankings, but my soul, silent, hidden, dead. I believed in nothing. Not in God, not in destiny, even less in repentance. But everything changed that cursed day. The set caught fire. I was trapped, alone, screaming for help, and no one came. There, between the smoke and death, I began to hear the only voice I never would have imagined hearing, that of God. My name is Claire Davis. I'm 28 years old. I'm American. And for almost 8 years, I was one of the most sought-after actresses in the adult industry in the United States. The media called me the fearless diva, but inside, I just wanted to disappear. Before continuing with my testimony, write in the comments where you're watching from. I want to know what countries this story reaches, because if it touched you, it might not be by chance. It was just another contract. The pay was high, $30,000 for 2 days of filming. The script, as always, degrading. 5 men, 1 woman, cameras everywhere. I hadn't felt anything for a long time. I had become automatic, robotic. But that day, something seemed different from the moment I arrived on set. The lights had been flickering since morning with no logical explanation. Muffled screams echoed backstage. Disputes between technicians that no one wanted to explain. The director, Marcus, usually confident and vulgar, was nervous, sweating excessively despite the air conditioning. He spent his time on the phone, speaking quietly in Italian. The technicians whispered among themselves, casting worried glances toward the emergency exits as if planning an escape. Even the other actors, veterans accustomed to the worst scenarios, seemed tense. Jim, an American who had worked in the industry for 15 years, kept looking at his watch. "Something's wrong," he murmured between takes. But as always in this business, questions remained unasked and answers ungiven. I should have listened to that inner voice that begged me to leave, that feeling of imminent danger that had been knotting my stomach since I walked through the studio door. But the money always spoke louder than my conscience or survival instinct. $30,000 represented 3 months' rent for my Los Angeles apartment, medical expenses for my mother, who still refused to speak to me, but accepted my money, and enough to last until the next contract. The set itself was a death trap under construction, overloaded with obsolete electrical equipment, with cables running everywhere like black snakes. Too many overheated halogen lights, too many machines in a space designed to be a simple warehouse. The acrid smell of burning plastic had been floating in the air for hours. But when I mentioned this suspicious odor, Marcus had brushed off my concerns with an annoyed gesture. "It's normal, Claire. The new LED lights heat up at first. You've been in this business long enough to know we don't stop for such little things." And then, the explosion. 2:47 p.m. Precisely, I remember, because I had looked at my watch wondering how much longer this torture would last. A violent short circuit in the main electrical panel, located just behind my back. Sparks like malevolent fireworks, white and blinding. Then a muffled blast that shook the entire building. The fire spread with a speed and violence I never would have imagined possible. In seconds, it was absolute chaos. Heart-wrenching screams, blind panic, and me, thrown to the ground, then trapped under a 50-pound light that had fallen on me in the general stampede of evacuation. I tried to crawl under this light that was crushing my legs. I tried to scream with all my remaining strength, but no one came back for me. The technicians had fled, abandoning all their equipment. The actors too, instantly forgetting their colleagues. And me? Naked, burned, completely forgotten. My body was supposedly the most known and desired in the American industry. But at that moment, it wasn't even worth a backward glance. Not even a rescue gesture. The black and toxic smoke escaping from the melting electrical equipment invaded my lungs with each breath. It was like swallowing razor blades soaked in acid. My eyes burned so intensely that I could no longer distinguish anything, not even my own hand extended in front of my face. The floor beneath me was littered with glass debris and metal fragments heated white-hot by the fire. Every attempt to pull myself toward the exit lacerated my palms and knees on these sharp shards. The most terrifying thing wasn't even this atrocious physical pain. radiating throughout my body. It was this deathly silence that had followed the initial chaos. No more human screams, no more footsteps running toward exits, no more voices calling for help. Just the sinister and hypnotic crackling of the fire gaining ground around me, and this disturbing hissing of something, plastic, metal, slowly melting somewhere in the growing darkness. I was completely alone, facing my own death approaching inexorably, in my head clouded by smoke and lack of oxygen. Disconnected and painful thoughts jostled without logic. My parents, who had definitively disowned me when they discovered the nature of my work 3 years earlier. "You're no longer our daughter," my father had declared before hanging up for the last time. My so-called friends from the industry, who only called when they needed something, money, contacts, or services. The dozens of men who had used me, then thrown me away like a dirty tissue without ever caring about the woman behind the actress. Had I really lived during these 28 years of existence? Or had I simply survived, day after day, content to exist as an entertainment object for frustrated adults? When had I laughed for the last time without it being for the cameras? When had I cried for anything other than shame and self-destruction? It was there, my face pressed against that dirty floor covered with debris, death extending its arms to me, that I whispered these words for the first time in my adult life. If someone hears me, if someone exists somewhere, save me. I didn't even know who I was addressing. God? The universe? Chance? But these words came from somewhere deep inside me, from a secret place I thought was dead and buried since my teenage years. I woke up 3 days later at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center in the burn unit, intubated on IV drips, surrounded by machines that beeped regularly. Second-degree burns on 15% of my body. Severe chemical bronchitis. Psychological trauma, the medical file said. And beside my bed, a woman completely covered from feet to wrists. Navy blue headscarf carefully tied. Serene face despite fatigue. Deep brown eyes that didn't judge me. Nurse? Muslim? She didn't speak much the first days. She simply held my hand for a few seconds at each visit. A silent but comforting presence. Her name was Khadija Al-Hassan, 47 years old, mother of 4 children, originally from a small village near Damascus, but living in America for 23 years. She had been working in this unit for 10 years, specializing in accompanying traumatized patients. Later, I would learn that she had volunteered to take care of me specifically, while all the other caregivers whispered in the hallways about the porn actress who got what she deserved, and some even refused to treat me on moral principle. The first day of my regained consciousness, she simply checked my bandages in religious silence, but I felt in each of her gestures an infinite gentleness that I hadn't felt since childhood. When she changed my bandages on the burned areas, she did it with extraordinary delicacy, as if my damaged and soiled body was something precious in her eyes. No one had ever touched me with such respect and tenderness, not even my parents when I was a child. The second day, she began talking to me during care. Not about my work, not about the accident, not about my sulfurous celebrity that the whole hospital was talking about. She told me simple and ordinary things. The fine rain that had been falling on Los Angeles for 3 days. Her eldest son, Yusef, who was starting his medical studies at UCLA. A recipe for chicken tagine that her grandmother had passed down to her before dying. The traffic jams on the 405 that had made her late that morning. Mundane conversations that did me extraordinary good, as if I had become a normal person again, worthy of interest for something other than my body. The third day, she left me a small, carefully folded paper under my water glass. I waited for her to leave the room to open it with trembling hands. The writing was round and careful, almost childlike. You are not what they made of you. You are not what you did either. You are what Allah can still restore in you. I read it 10 times, 20 times, 50 times. These simple words resonated in my head like a powerful echo I couldn't silence, revealing a spiritual thirst I had buried for years. The fourth day, Khadija discreetly placed a small copy of the Quran on my bedside table. Bilingual Arabic-English edition, simple green cover, without gilding or artifice. I first wanted to laugh, then mock. God? Religion? After everything I had lived through and made my soul endure. It was almost insulting. But something inexplicable prevented me from throwing it in the trash or returning it with contempt. Maybe curiosity, maybe hospital boredom, maybe something else. I began reading out of pure cynicism, ready to mock these old wives' tales, as I called them internally. The first verses left me completely indifferent. Life rules, dietary laws, stories of prophets I knew nothing about. At least it passes time, I told myself, turning pages without great conviction. But the more I advanced in this reading, the more certain sentences touched me strangely, inexplicably. There were passages about divine mercy that surpassed all human sins, about the possibility of spiritual rebirth even for the most lost and soiled souls, about God's unconditional love for his wayward creatures. Words that seemed written especially for me, as if the book was reading me instead of me reading it. This troubling sensation of being understood, recognized, forgiven, before even asking for forgiveness. One verse in particular struck me like a spiritual slap. And whoever had his soul covered with dust and defilement will be washed and purified by divine mercy. I closed the book abruptly, heart pounding, hands trembling. How could these words, written more than 14 centuries ago, describe so precisely what I felt deep inside me? This permanent sensation of being covered with invisible dirt, spiritual dust that had accumulated year after year on my soul until it completely suffocated it. Khadija returned that same evening for the night shift. She saw the Quran open on my knees, my cheeks still wet with tears, and smiled with maternal gentleness. "It speaks to you, doesn't it?" she asked without surprise, as if she expected this reaction. I nodded, unable to lie or deny the evidence. "That's perfectly normal," she replied, adjusting my IV. "Allah always seeks his lost children, even those who think they've gone too far to ever return to him." That night, despite the physical pain and recurring nightmares of the fire, I continued reading until dawn, and for the first time in years, I fell asleep without needing sleeping pills or anxiety medication to calm my nighttime panic attacks. The words of the Quran resonated in my dreams like a forgotten childhood lullaby, soothing and protective. The third night, I had a fever, hallucinations, pain, and a vision. A veiled woman standing at the door, praying. Was it the nurse? Was it a dream? When I woke up, the real Khadija told me, "Yesterday at 2 a.m., I asked Allah to show you what celebrity had hidden." At that moment, something broke in me, or rather something was repaired. I cried, and for the first time, it wasn't from shame, it was from hope. A fragile, trembling hope, but real, like a small flame reborn from its ashes. She explained to me later that she prayed for me every night since my arrival, not just for my physical healing, but for me to find inner peace. "I felt that Allah was sending me to you," she confided, "not by chance, not by coincidence, by necessity. You needed to hear that you were worth more than what the world had made you believe." This revelation overwhelmed me. A stranger was praying for me while my own family had abandoned me. A woman I had met in the worst circumstances of my life believed in me more than I had ever believed in myself. For the first time, I glimpsed what unconditional love could be. The following days, Khadija told me about her own journey. Married very young in Syria, arrived in America without speaking English, she had to rebuild everything. Her nursing studies resumed at 30. Her children raised between two cultures, her faith as the only anchor point in life's storms. "Islam didn't give me an easy life," she said. "It gave me a life that has meaning. The scars from the fire were nothing compared to the scars from what I had lived through before. The men who had used me, the producers who had drugged me, the awards I received smiling, and that I vomited crying afterwards. But every time I read the Quran, every time I saw Khadija praying in the corner, I saw a woman invisible to the world's eyes, but precious before God. Shame had become my constant companion. It followed me everywhere, slipped into every moment of happiness to corrupt it. When I looked at normal couples on the street, I thought of all those men who had touched me without love. When I saw happy families, I thought back to the disgust in my parents' eyes when they discovered my profession. The worst were the memories of the early days. I was 18 when I signed my first contract. I was naive. I thought it would be different, more artistic. I lied to myself saying it was art, body expression. But very quickly reality caught up with me. Increasingly degrading demands, increasingly violent scenes, substances to help cope. There was Mark, this producer, who had promised to get me into traditional cinema. For 6 months, he manipulated me, making me believe he really loved me. Then I discovered he was saying exactly the same thing to 3 other girls. He collected actresses like trophies, turning us against each other. There was that private party at an investor's where I was drugged without my knowledge. I woke up in a bed I didn't know, with marks on my body, and no memory of the night. When I wanted to file a complaint, they laughed at me. A porn actress crying rape! Who's going to believe you? That day, a part of me died definitively. But reading the redemption stories in the Quran, I began to understand that my past didn't define my future, that God could transform even the darkest experiences into light to illuminate the path of other lost people. I left the hospital after 2 weeks. A director called me the same day. We're going to turn the accident into marketing. You're going to come back bigger than ever. It was a 6-figure contract. I said, no. For the first time in my career, I was no longer selling my body. I wanted to protect my soul. The silence on the other end of the line was liberating. Then came anger. You're crazy. You'll never find such an opportunity again. In 6 months, no one will remember you. He was probably right from a commercial standpoint, but for the first time, I didn't care. The following weeks were financially difficult. My agent dropped me. My friends from the industry disappeared. Invitations to parties dried up. But strangely, I felt lighter, as if I had put down a burden I had been carrying for years without realizing it. Khadija came to see me at home several times a week. She brought dishes prepared by her mother, books about Islam, but especially her benevolent presence. True freedom, she told me, isn't being able to do everything. It's having the strength not to do what destroys us. I began looking for work in other fields. With my education level, a high school diploma, and a few months of college literature, it wasn't easy. But I finally found a position as a saleswoman in a clothing store. The salary was ridiculous compared to what I earned before, but it was the first clean money I had touched in years. My colleagues didn't know who I was. To them, I was just Claire, the new one who smiled a lot and never talked about her past. This anonymity was an unexpected gift. I rediscovered the pleasure of normal conversations, ordinary concerns, the simplicity of human relationships without sexual or financial stakes. I entered the mosque with fear, with shame, thinking everyone would judge me. But crossing the threshold, a woman took me in her arms. That's all. No questions, no past. There, covered, sitting on the floor, listening to the gentle recitation of a surah. My whole body got goosebumps. I cried silently, again, but now, knowing for whom. It was a Friday afternoon. Khadija had suggested I accompany her to Friday prayer at her mosque in downtown LA. I had refused several times, terrified at the idea of being recognized, judged, rejected. But that day, something pushed me to accept. The mosque was simpler than I imagined. No gilding, no grandeur, just clean carpet and bare walls. The atmosphere was peaceful, almost meditative. Women arrived in small groups, greeting each other warmly, carefully removing their shoes. Khadija had lent me a hijab and a long dress. I had never covered myself like this, and strangely, instead of feeling suffocated, I felt protected, as if these clothes created a safety bubble around me. My body, so long exposed, offered, consumed, was finally safe from gazes. When the Imam began recitation, I was struck by the beauty of the Arabic language. I didn't understand the words, but the melody touched something deep in me. It was as if a part of my soul, asleep for years, was gently awakening. The women around me prayed with a concentration and serenity I envied. At the end of prayer, several women came to greet me. None asked who I was or what I did for a living. They just welcomed me as a sister. One of them, a grandmother with white hair, simply said, "Welcome home, my daughter." These simple words resonated in me for days. The following Friday, In the presence of two witnesses and the same nurse who had prayed for me, I pronounced, Ashhadu an la ilaha illa Allah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. It wasn't a ritual. It was a rebirth. At that moment, Claire Davis died, and Amina, servant of Allah, was born. The name had been suggested by Khadija, Amina, the trustworthy one, she who keeps secrets and protects wounded souls. A new name for a new life. The conversion itself was simple. A few words in Arabic, two witnesses, and it was done. But the emotion was indescribable. I felt like I was finding myself after years of wandering, as if all the pieces of my life's puzzle finally found their place. In the weeks that followed, I began learning the basics of my new faith. The 5 daily prayers, at first difficult to integrate into my schedule, became precious appointments with myself and with God. Ramadan, which I experienced for the first time the following year, taught me discipline and compassion for those who have no choice but to fast. I also discovered the solidarity of the Muslim community. When I lost my job because of a customer who had recognized me and caused a scandal, several sisters from the mosque helped me find a new position. When I had financial difficulties, a discreet collection was organized without my asking for anything. My biological family didn't understand my conversion. First a porn actress, now a fundamentalist, my mother had said during our last phone conversation. But I had found a new family, a spiritual one, that accepted me completely. The following Friday, in the presence of 2 witnesses and the same nurse who had prayed for me, I pronounced, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. It wasn't a ritual. It was a rebirth. At that moment, Claire Davis died, and Amina, servant of Allah, was born. The name had been suggested by Khadija, Amina, the trustworthy one, she who keeps secrets and protects wounded souls. A new name for a new life. The conversion itself was simple. A few words in Arabic, 2 witnesses, and it was done. But the emotion was indescribable. I felt like I was finding myself after years of wandering, as if all the pieces of my life's puzzle finally found their place. In the weeks that followed, I began learning the basics of my new faith. The 5 daily prayers, at first difficult to integrate into my schedule, became precious appointments with myself and with God. Ramadan, which I experienced for the first time the following year, taught me discipline and compassion for those who have no choice but to fast. I also discovered the solidarity of the Muslim community. When I lost my job because of a customer who had recognized me and caused a scandal, several sisters from the mosque helped me find a new position. When I had financial difficulties, a discreet collection was organized without my asking for anything. My biological family didn't understand my conversion. First a porn actress, now a fundamentalist, my mother had said during our last phone conversation. But I had found a new family, a spiritual one, that accepted me completely. If this story touched you, share it, because God doesn't wait for you to be perfect to reach you. He enters the darkest cave, the most intense fire, the deepest shame, and restores what no one else wanted. Light can still reach those at the bottom. I am living proof. Today, I work in an association that helps women victims of violence and exploitation. My past, heavy as it may be, has become my strength to understand and accompany other wounded souls. If you're going through a difficult period, if you feel lost, if you think your past condemns you forever, know that it's not true. There's always a way out, always a possibility to start over. Sometimes, all it takes is an encounter, a book, an extended hand to change everything.